Welcome to the Nora Eccles Harrison Museum of Art. I'm so glad you've taken the time to join us virtually today. The Nora Eccles Harrison Museum of Art was founded by Nora Eccles and her husband Richard Harrison. NEMA officially opened in 1982 and with the help of many students and artists has been providing art goers with exhibitions, galleries, and beautiful works of art to come see ever since. This exhibition, Magical Surrealism, is being put on by NEMA and has been curated by one of Utah State's own art students. If you come this way, I'll introduce you to her. Miriam Musgrave moved to Utah from North Carolina to apply for Utah State's Interior Architecture and Design program. It has always been her dream to design buildings and homes. She was accepted into the program last spring and is now in her sophomore year. In the future, she hopes to repurpose old buildings to give them new life and introduce them to new audiences. Miriam has always had an interest and admiration for art. She has loved learning about Latin American art and artists the past few months and is looking forward to sharing what she has found most interesting with you today. Magical realism is a style of art that, with the exception of certain elements that are magical or supernatural, depicts real life. Surrealism, on the other hand, is an artistic style that focuses on the uncanny, absurdist, or subconscious. In this exhibition, you will see a selection of works made by Latin American artists. As you view each of these artistic works, you will be given a few seconds wherein you are challenged to determine if the piece is magical realism or surreal before it is revealed in their descriptions. Perhaps, by the end of this exhibition, a consensus can be reached on whether or not magical realism and surrealism should be separate categories or combined into one category that encompasses all the magical, subconscious, and uncanny qualities. Without further ado, we'll turn our attention to our first piece and start our journey through magical surrealism. First work is by Jose Guadalupe Posada. He was born in Mexico in 1852. While he may not have been famous for being a surrealist or a magical realist, his most well-known pieces bring magical realism to mind. Posada is most famous for the skeletons that he illustrated for the paper he worked for, El Jicote. This piece in particular contains similar themes to other works that fall within magical realism. The most notable magical component of this piece, Calaveras riding bicycles, as its name prefaces, is the fact that skeletons are riding bicycles. Other mentionable magical components include the way the skeletons are interacting with one another despite being inanimate, and the wings on the largest of the skeletons. Magical realism in Latin America started with Gabriel Garcia Marquez as a literary genre. Posada's wings are reminiscent of Marquez's stories, which often depicted humans with magical or odd qualities, such as wings. Despite not being a magical realist himself, his works depicting lively calaveras certainly would classify his work as such. Let's continue our tour to our next works straight ahead. Both Leonora Carrington and Remedios Varo were taught by famous artists and are now influential women in the surreal art world. Interestingly, both of these pieces, And Then We Saw the Daughter of the Minotaur and Tellur por Dames, have been classified as surreal works of art. Despite their similarities and shared classification, there are some key differences between Carrington's and Varro's work. Carrington's And Then We Saw the Daughter of the Minotaur depicts an unexplainable ethereal scene. While there are aspects that could be considered more natural, such as the two children or the dogs, they are juxtaposed with the indoor night sky, the Minotaur, and the floral creature. With everything going on, it's nearly impossible to retrieve a coherent narrative to accompany the depicted scene. Varro's Tellur por Dames translates directly to Tailor for Women, and that is exactly what she has depicted. There is a clear story being told, and yet a closer look tells a different story. Unlike Carrington's pieces, Varro's demand a keen eye to conclude her work is surreal. When closely examined, surreal components become evident. Each of the women in the painting is wearing a dress with odd qualities that some may consider magical. Because this piece is not evidently surreal until looked at closely, it could be argued that this is actually magical realism. If you come with me now, we'll turn our attention to the right. Neither great goddess nor divine shepherdess were created with the intent of being surreal or magically real works. In fact, they are not considered surrealist or magical realist today. But when you analyze them through a new lens, it is clear that they each fit the description of magical realism. The Great Goddess fresco was found at Teotihuacan in 1942, but it was created sometime between 100 BC and AD 650. Because of its age, we do not have a lot of information about it. It is theorized that the Great Goddess was a Mayan deity that had power over creation and destruction. In the fresco, we see the Great Goddess depicted. She appears to be using her power to nourish the earth. It is thought that she is also providing protection to her followers. Cabrera's Divine Shepherdess has similar themes to the Great Goddess. Mary is depicted, and she too is protecting. There are cherub angels and sheep surrounding Mary. However, we see one sheep off in the distance by itself. There is a beast chasing the lamb, and the lamb yells, Ave Maria. Mary responds by sending an archangel to protect the sheep. Although neither of these artists purposefully created magically real works, today we can determine that these works of art could fall into this category. Let's continue this way to our next piece. Rufino Tamayo was an influential artist during his lifetime, and was often categorized as a surrealist. His legacy has influenced many others to pursue art as well. One such individual is Felipe Morales. These two pieces by Tamayo and Morales have been said to be magical realism, although some may disagree. Tamayo's Perro Ayudando a la Luna, Dog Howling at the Moon, depicts a dog that seems fairly naturalistic, albeit painted in a fragmented style. This fragmented style is exactly what distracts from the magical elements of the piece. If you look closely, you will see that the dog's bones and some of its organs have been painted on the outside of its body. Other artists that have been called magical realists have portrayed anatomy on the outside of a figure's body as well. One such artist is Frida Kahlo in her piece, The Two Fridas, where her heart and veins are painted atop her clothing. These similar elements, along with the fact that Tamayo has been called a magical realist, could be used as evidence that Perro Ayudando a la Luna is in fact magical realism. Morales participated in the Rufino Tamayo Plastic Arts Workshop following Tamayo's death. It was during this workshop that he produced Nuevo Amanecer y Eclipse, New Dawn and Eclipse, which was meant to commemorate Tamayo. This piece contains many magically real elements and expresses themes common in magical realism. We see a girl talking with the moon's shadow, and in front of her we see a Nahul, a large black dog. The Nahul is a shape-shifting spirit guide that is meant to lead people to the afterlife. The afterlife is a common theme of magical realism. If you follow me to your left, we will continue our tour. Both Wilfredo Lam and Roberto Mata were labeled surrealists during their lifetimes and are remembered as such. These two works, La Jungla and On the Edge of a Dream, did not fit into the artistic categories of the time, and so it was concluded they were surreal, but not wholly. This was the case for many works by Latin American artists that did not fit into the specified categories of the time. Lam's La Jungla was painted very intentionally. He depicted a sacred space in another dimension where everyone's minds are connected universally. This space is intangible, but Lam is said to have accessed it while in Cuba. The piece itself was concluded to be a mixture of surrealism and cubism because of the fragmented shapes that make up the scene. Mata's On the Edge of a Dream seems to create a similar intangible realm to that of Wilfredo's La Jungla. Mata's work has been said to create a bridge between surrealism and abstraction. This work is one that embraces its title. On the Edge of a Dream creates a feeling of being in a psychedelic dreamscape that you are not quite able to grasp. Mata is able to create space despite the forms being abstract in shape. The surreal environment he created in this piece could be different to each person that views it because of its abstract nature, which in a way adds to its surreal quality. If each person that views this work sees something slightly different, that's because it's an unexplainable experience of our subconscious minds. We'll move this way to our last piece in our exhibition by an artist you likely know. Frida Kahlo is arguably one of the most famous figures in the history of art. She is especially relevant to this exhibition as she was called a magical realist by some and a surrealist by many others. Weeping Coconuts differs from the majority of Kahlo's other works. She is most famous for her self-portraits with surreal twists. Many are unfamiliar with the still lifes she created towards the end of her life. Weeping Coconuts creates an interesting contrast. It is a still life which would typically be considered realism or naturalism at the very least. Yet, Kahlo was able to give it a deeper meaning and make it into something else. She rendered one of the coconuts with tears dripping down its side. This gives the coconut life and creates a story for us to embellish for ourselves. The fact that it is completely naturalistic, apart from the tear, which is out of place, would classify this work as magical realism. With that, we conclude our journey. Follow me this way to the exit. Thank you for joining me today on our tour of magical surrealism. Hopefully you've learned a little bit about magical realism and surrealism. Perhaps you have more questions surrounding these categories. If you'd like to learn more about the pieces we looked at today, make sure you look through the exhibition catalog following this virtual tour.